Okay, we'll go in 5, 4, 3, 2. Thomas Winstanley. Last time Jeremy and I sat down with you, it was Planet 13 in Las Vegas. It was November or December 2023. Anything happened since then?
Couple of life updates, professional updates, but business as usual.
Not business as usual. Last time we chatted, you were with Theory Wellness. You were making your home, I think, in Western Massachusetts. A lot of that has changed. It says edibles.com underneath you. We saw an announcement within the past week. Give us a quick update because it seems monumental what you have done.
Well, monumental, I don't know about that, but after leaving Theory, I actually took a role as the executive vice president and general manager of edibles.com, which is a new portfolio brand under Edible Brands, the parent company of Edible Arrangements. Over the summer, relocated down to Atlanta, and for the last 9 months have been building very quietly in stealth mode this massive project in the hemp space that I'm really excited about.
Well, we'll start to see comments coming in soon because anytime we say the word hemp on anything we do at Cultivated, it becomes a lightning rod for people saying that's absolutely the movement and let's get consumers exactly what they want, how they want it. And some folks saying, no, we operate in a heavily regulated industry in cannabis. This is anathema to what we want to do. I can only imagine your phone is blowing up with similar comments or complaints or compliments. What has the past couple of days been like?
Yeah, I mean, so we launched on Thursday, so it's been wild. I think there were a couple of things that were abundantly clear at the time of launch. I think we were building, for 9 months, really developing what is this? What does it become? How do we build this in a way that is really all-encompassing from the brand side, from the infrastructure, fulfillment side, the positioning and platform. And, it's been interesting because a lot of the brands that we are working with are in both camps, both cannabis and hemp. And, surprisingly, the support we've received has been really exciting. And I think it is a justification of the business we were creating in the first place. Certainly I think now, hemp was maybe a dirtier word than it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago. But I think ultimately, from my perspective, connecting consumers to THC products, regardless of how we're classifying where this THC is coming from, is important. And I think this is where, this hasn't really changed from being in the cannabis side. It's what brought me into cannabis in the first place. And it certainly was a major variable of coming here and doing this where, I think we're seeing hemp's rise in size and scale is very reflective of consumers wanting access to this. And we hope to be a very key point of distribution to those consumers in the future.
Can you, Thomas, talk a little bit about what it was like getting, a 25-year-old company, Edible Arrangements, up to speed on hemp, on the cannabis space, and talk a little bit about the evolution that they had to go through, both with you in particular and with the broader industry.
Yeah. So, one of the things that was really interesting is that back in 2019, 2020, they had actually tried to do something in the CBD space. That was all CBD, where they were blending CBD with chocolate and trying to do a more kind of hybrid business approach. I think in a lot of ways they were early to it. But I think Tariq Farid, who is the founder, his daughter, who's now the CEO, I think they both knew that there was something there. And I think in the last few years, it became more clear that, they have the IP, the trademark for the word edibles. They just secured the URL last year. And I think they watched this market really explode. What was interesting when they first approached me about it, their intent was, we want to come from a place of health and wellness. We want safety, we want trust, we want reliability, we want to help provide alternative access to these products based on, the outcomes people are seeking, in using them in the first place. So, and that's really where they brought me on board, knowing kind of where they wanted it to go. And so, coming to this massive company that is really driven by this category, their portfolio of brands are all kind of focused around this wellness angle, whether it's wellness gifting with fruit, which we're very well known for with edible arrangements. They have an e-commerce platform called Fresh Fruit that delivers fruit weekly. We just acquired a fast casual restaurant chain called Roti, which is Mediterranean style. So they have this portfolio they were building. And so, they knew that they have something really special. They knew where they wanted it to go. So they said, how do we engineer this? And so, when to your question of, how did we kind of start to build into this? In the first couple of weeks, I worked really closely with our chief legal officer, who was amazing and super supportive of the project. And, I said, the first couple of things that we really want to make sure we're getting a really clean grasp on. I'd known the cannabis space really well in terms of policy, hemp, not as much. And so we brought on we joined the trade association, the Hemp Beverage Association, which is, shout out to those guys. They're doing some incredible stuff right now in the space. We brought on a lobbyist or a legal firm to help with some of the policy side. And, we spent, probably the first few months really looking at the state of regulatory affairs, understanding exactly where we would fall within it, how our business model would then interact with the policies and the boards. And, it's funny because you do all that homework and then, they change the assignment on you with policies that are constantly evolving. And so, we knew early on, though, that compliance was going to be one of the most key tenets of our success. If we have aspirations to be a national leader in this marketplace and help influence the future of this marketplace, compliance has to be front and center. And credit to this team here, this executive team, everybody was bought in and said, okay, well, here's what I need in terms of funding. These are the firms that I want to recommend, and I think it was really easy to start to build a little bit of that awareness and that strategy early on to help set an expectation of what would be required in the future to do this well. And that to me was the most critical point of saying, okay, if we're going to have to do it the right way.
It's that exact point that I think Jeremy and I were chatting earlier today about, which was when you go to edibles.com now, it asks you if you're 21, but also if you're in California, right?
Yeah.
So that's like, let's pause on that for a second, because yes, it's California now where they have certainly, you could describe whatever you want, a THC, hemp-derived THC ban, or trying to implement such a thing. We also heard news this week about Arizona. The compliance around this is changing for sure, or certainly top of mind. Like, obviously you're on top of it, but how does that factor into like creating a business around, well, it's like cannabis, right? In certain regulatory environments, and how do you put those controls or compliance in place to do that?
So the number one rule is don't panic with the executive team, because for the first couple of weeks, every single minor piece of news around regulations was an email to me saying, like, do we need to worry? Do we need to worry? And I said, guys, first off, let me worry about policy. I will raise a yellow flag and then a red flag when we have to be, materially concerned. And essentially, what we're constantly evaluating and looking at these policies as they are evolving. Our launch strategy has evolved a few times in the last 6 months, mostly because of these changing policies and where we're really trying to enter the market into in a sustainable way. And that's going to be something that doesn't change for us. I think what now changes a little bit more from our view of policy is now that the cover's off, we can step in a little bit more than we could previously. A lot of what we were watching in the past, we didn't really want to unveil what we were doing until the right moment, which was last Thursday. So 9 months of keeping a secret was not easy. But now kind of takes another phase for us of advocacy, of how do we start to step into some of these discussions in the markets that we want to go be a part of, and how do we start to help develop policy that is, I think we come at policy from a very different lens from a lot of the folks who are working on it, which are brands or distributors, or, I think seeing a 25-year-old company come into the space that's privately owned saying, hey, look, we're saying this is not that bad, nor should you. I think we have a different lens because obviously we have a pre-existing business. We didn't need to do this, but we chose to because we knew we could do it right. And we hope over time in the next, few months, we're going to continue to try to involve ourselves in policy discussions.
So Thomas, we have a lot of regulators and lobbyists and policymakers that watch the show. When you talk about the advocacy space, when you talk about policy, what do you want to see? Like, what would make this business work in terms of regulations, and what can you communicate about that?
Oh, this is a great question. I think essentially, look, we see cannabis as this lightning rod that has really, really aggressive policies tied to it, and I think in certain ways over-regulated. I think on the hemp side, there are certain areas and parts of the country that are under-regulated. And I think regulations are actually a good thing, I would argue, for the future of hemp. We actually want policy. We want things like restrictions on dose, milligram caps on products, child-safe packaging. We want to make sure COAs exist. We think there should be licenses for people who are participating in this space. And I think this is where we think thoughtful legislation can actually help create better consumer safety protocols. I think what we're seeing a lot of is that politicians are looking at this as a major threat to consumers. And I don't disagree to some extent. I think what we are seeing are these very aggressive bans are not within the best interests of the consumers. I think what we learn from aggressive policy with outright bans is you remove the good actors and you create more room for the bad actors. And I think, very thoughtful regulations, things like an excise tax, that you can then take those, revenue generated from these types of businesses and use this towards creating policy enforcement, compliance enforcement. I think there's a very material discussion that needs to happen around creating and codifying this industry. And I think because we are talking about products that are 5 milligrams per serving, we are not talking about THCA infused pre-rolls that are 99.9%. We are talking about a very, a consumer packaged good that is, I would argue, no worse than alcohol. And so I think when I think about all the regulators and the policymakers, I think this is the narrative to me that really makes a lot of sense. I couldn't believe when I moved to Georgia, driving and seeing gas stations selling pre-rolls with testing QR codes that go nowhere. And right. I think there is a consumer issue here. I think there's a major one. And I want to be clear, we think that regulations are good within the right context. And we actually, I think most politicians may not realize we have the same mindset about making this a healthier category for consumers.
So let me just follow that up with kind of the more difficult question, right? Jay mentioned Arizona. The Attorney General wants to, cohere intoxicating hemp sales into the dispensary channel. It's a little bit wonky, and I imagine that will be subject to legal challenge, but I'm sure you've gamed that out, right? Like, what would it mean if other states choose to do that, especially where there's larger markets? Is the dispensary channel somewhere you'd like to compete, or is that regulations that you just don't want to see?
Well, I think it's hard to say because this is all happening so fast. I would advocate, I think generally speaking, the way that I look at the future of this category, generally speaking, is we are not talking about regulating hemp versus cannabis. We are talking about THC regulation. We are talking about regulating a molecule that we have assigned a somewhat artificial, bow around based on 0.3% weight by volume. I think the future of what will likely unfold in my best case rose-colored glasses view is that there should be criteria of where a certain dosing or a certain serving size can be available in 21 plus areas. I think over a certain level should also have covenants for dispensaries. And I think this is where there's a bifurcation of policy that's starting to take shape. I think we're seeing some extremes on both sides. And I think generally too, there's so much room for everybody. I don't think dispensaries are ever going to have people who don't want those flower products that are, THCA. or inhalables. I think there's always going to be a place for that. But I also think, too, the same people who are looking to buy infused beverages, I don't think we should rescind their access to being able to purchase them at a liquor store. But again, I think this is where a lot of this policy discussion, I think, is really healthy in some ways. It's painful, but nothing good comes from something easy. So we're going to watch this really closely. And I think, it will be very interesting to see, 12 months, 16 months down the road here, what does policy look like at a federal level with new iterations of the Farm Bill? Because I think we've gotten now 2 years worth of extensions of the Farm Bill. It's going to be very interesting to see how this all envelops. But I think there's enough momentum around hemp today that there is a significant opportunity for hemp to continue to operate in these points of distribution as we see.
Yeah, well, DC is super predictable right now, so I'm sure the Farm Bill will be brought to the floor.
Well, okay, one thing about that, one of the things that I found so ironic about all of this is that, I've shared this before, but, Pew Research shows that 88% of Americans support some form of legalization of these products.
Right.
And in the last 2 decades, that support has grown by 50%. Now, tell me one bipartisan issue where people are actually coming together on versus moving in different directions. This is one of them. And I think that power in numbers from the American consumers is very significant to what is the ultimate outcome of how we regulate this. So
proving once again that THC brings people together. I've been saying that for a long time.
For sure. Yeah. And look, like you can look at a scatter plot of all of these different signals from the decline of alcohol sales, the Gen Z being one of the first generations to have a low adoption rate of alcohol. I mean, we're seeing all of these different migratory patterns of consumer behavior that I would argue are leading into this industry. Why? Well, because the accessibility is easier. There's more brands that are out there that people recognize, that feel comfortable purchasing. The places where consumers can access these products are increasing. And I think we're going to continue to see that sentiment build.
I think so too. I mean, I was just reading a case study. Is it Athletic Brewing? Is that the one? It's like a non-alcoholic beer that they pitch it like beer, right? It's not, I mean, Tom Holland just launched his own non-alcoholic beer and is crushing it too. So, I think there's just this, we are in this major sea change. And I think, the cannabis hemp line is kind of, I think people who straddle that way more closely than maybe is necessary. I think ultimately we are talking about THC. It's not the plant, it's the molecule. And let's figure out how to handle the molecule. Thomas, we're catching you at the end of week 1 of your public announcement. We hope maybe we'll connect with you at the end of month 1 and see how it's going 1 month in and see how edibles.com is going. I have some travel plans to the States. I'm gonna place an order when I'm on the road and give it a test run, and then I'll report back. How's that sound?
I love it.
I love it. And maybe if I travels take me through the ATL, I'll stop by and say hello.
Let me know. We haven't crossed paths yet. I know you've gone to my other locations in the past with Theory, so you're welcome to come on by the Edible corporate offices and hang out in my office anytime.
That sounds like a great invitation, especially with the brands that you have on edibles.com now. Go there now, and we'll send people the link, because it is certainly brands. I mean, I saw Cantrip, Heirloom, Wana, the ones that we always talk about in the newsletter that we've had folks on talking about their hemp businesses as well. So it is interesting to see it all sort of coming together full circle. But Thomas, we super appreciate the time during this very busy week.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's always great to chat with you guys. And, thanks for expressing interest, and we'll keep you posted. All right.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thanks, Thomas.
All right. Cheers.